What I learned more than anything was that if you have an idea and someone's just willing to go, yeah, do it, then you can just go for it. I'm best when I've got an idea and I can just run with it, and I don't flourish as well, or I don't enjoy as much when I'm just given a very do what you're told, very rote job, and well, you shouldn't be talking to that person and it's not your job to speak to that person. Hadn't figured out what the product would be yet, but can an AI process 60,000 songs a day? Because a human can't. Like, even if assuming they're all 3.5 minutes, put them back to back, physically a human couldn't listen to all of them. I just remember I said, could you build an AI that listened to music? And he went, I think I could. Let's try and test that theory within the next 2 weeks. And then after that, okay, well, if we can, what's the benefit? What's the output? What could we do with this? And it all just built from there. I always thought that I would end up running my own company or that I would do something, but I was just sort of waiting for an idea. And this is the part that I got wrong. I thought I'd just be, I don't know, having a shower, doing the washing up, and I'd suddenly go and I'd have a fully formed idea in my head.
A lightning bolt moment, yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Welcome to Tileyard, The Secret Sauce, the podcast that brings you behind the scenes at Europe's largest creative community. I'm your host, Nick Keynes, and each episode we'll be chatting with the game changers, disruptors, and innovators who are shaping the future of the music industry right here at Tileyard. Get ready for some incredible stories and inspirational characters. Let's go. You're in the other chair today, because I
am.
It was only yesterday you were sat in this chair interviewing one of your guests on your podcast that you record here at TYX.
Exactly, and it won't matter when this goes out, that'll still be true. It was still yesterday, regardless to what day it is today.
It will always be yesterday, absolutely. Well, it's great having you on the show. Thanks so much for coming in. We've known each other for a few years now. What I like to start with often is, back to the beginning of when music, particularly, because most of us that are most people on the show are in the music industry.
Yeah.
Back to when your first touch point into music. We were just having a bit of a laugh about it, that everyone who watches this podcast knows I never talk about the band I used to be an ultra.
Yeah.
I've gone and said it now, haven't I?
Yeah, you've dropped it. And actually, the first time we ever spoke on a call, I was living in Singapore. It was like a Zoom call. And on the call, you said to me that you'd been in a band, Ultra. And I was like, I know that name. And I was Googling it on the side whilst we were talking. And of course... And then I felt a bit weird about doing it, but you didn't seem to mind. I just went, I've seen you play. Because I was at the Newcastle Arena show where Ultra supported Boyzone when I was 15 years old.
Well, firstly, my heart sank when you said that, because it's like, I don't mind people knowing I was in the industry, but anyone that remembers the band, usually it's like, that's the end of the conversation.
Well, I'm showing my age as well a little bit there, but no, and in some ways it involves me admitting that I'd gone to see Boyzone, to be fair. So, no offence to the lads, but to be fair, there was like a big group of us from school, and like a couple of my girlfriends were just really into their pop bands, their boy bands, and I never say no to a night out. It was true at 15, it's true now.
Well, I like to hear that. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad we didn't put you off music as well, because that had been known. Well, look, great to have you. I mean, I can remember that first conversation. Yeah. And it's actually a lot about what I've always done at Tileyard. It's about being introduced to and then meeting really, really interesting people on a mission, doing something interesting in the sector or in the creative industries. We had an amazing chat. And actually, I can remember thinking, God, that would have made a good podcast, that chat. And I guess probably what today's going to be about is we're going to reenact that a little bit.
Yeah, happy with that.
We go back. So back to you at a Boyzone concert, watching Ultra open up the show.
Yeah.
Were you always into music? Were you a musician yourself? What got you interested in music?
Yeah, so you know what? It goes back even earlier than that for me, because I was 15 at that show, and I got my first guitar for my 13th birthday. So I'll have been playing guitar for about 2 years, and I was always very, very much into like heavy rock music, punk bands. I was listening to a lot of Green Day, a lot of Offspring, that sort of thing at the time. And I remember, it'll have been when I was 12. My brother one day just said to me, and my brother's a year older, he just went, wouldn't it be cool to be able to play the guitar? And I went, yeah, it would be cool, wouldn't it? And I was thinking about it. And then by the time my 13th birthday came around, I just said to my dad, I want a guitar for my birthday. And, my dad's amazing. There are so many people in life and in the industry. And also, not to put too fine a point on it, quite often men who when you say, I want to do this or I'm going to do something, they go, no, you don't, you won't, no, you won't, you'll give it up, you won't be bothered, you won't do it. Nah, I'm not paying for that. But my dad just went, yep, no worries, let's do it. And then, took me down to a guitar shop in Darlington and bought me a Fender Telecaster, which was my first guitar.
Good choice.
Mexican Fender Tele. Still have it. Still have the guitar to this day. It's my number one sentimental guitar. And bought me it and just never doubted me. That if I said I was doing it, I was doing it. And so that was really, got a guitar for my 13th birthday. I even remember I had a party of like all my mates from school, probably the boys' own crowd, and they all sort of came round for like some party food at mine. And I went, look what I got. And I walked out and got it and I walked it in. I couldn't play anything at that point. So I just showed all my friends and went, I've got this.
They're beautiful looking things though, aren't they, guitars? That's the thing. Yeah. But I think I know a lot of people that collect guitars that don't really even play them. They just look so fantastic.
Yeah. Well, you play as well, right?
So that was, in fact, I caught up with an old schoolmate the other day who ended up in a band called Grand National, and I became a bit of a closet fan of Grand National. And we were he was 2 years older than me at school, but we used to, at lunchtime, sort of gravitate to the music department and just all had guitars and we were all trying to work stuff out. And it was such an important part of my upbringing. And it's something that I often forget, actually.
But I am going to call you on this, though, Nick, because this is now the second band that you've mentioned to me where I think naming is a challenge. So I know Grand National, but I think they have a big problem with the very famous band, The National, right? There's too close. And the same with Ultra. When you were coming up, I remember there was a really famous singer-songwriter, Ultra Nate, at the same time. So I think there's some sort of Venn diagram I'm sort of workshopping in my brain about you and band names.
It's so true. Do you know what? It took longer to come up with the name for the band than it is to write the album. Because we just couldn't. You think this is our one. We were really lucky. Signed to Warner's, right? And I think the band got signed before I joined them actually, and they were a school band. They'd had so many different names.
Yeah.
And then it was right. We need to change the name. We need to come up with a great name.
Yeah.
And oh my god, I mean, it's impossible. Where do you start? You want it to be cool. It's the name you're going to possibly be remembered for forever. And so we ended up. It was the. I'm going to cut in on that one. I can't remember whose album. Who had the Depeche Mode.
Depeche Mode.
Right. So coming up with a name so hard, and we actually ended up. It was named after the Depeche Mode record, Ultra.
Yeah.
And we sort of ummed and ahed about it. We weren't sure, and then we ended up going with Ultra.
Yeah.
And then of course Ultra Nate had a hit. Same sort of time we were putting our first single out. And it's
exactly.
Like,
I was thinking as well. This is all pre-internet, so you can't even like look it up and double check. Oh, is it Ultra? Is it Ultra Nate? It's so close. In terms of the name. So well, and all the good band names are gone.
They are. You can't be original anymore.
Exactly. There's been too many bands.
So you were playing guitar from 13. Did you? I mean, did you get good? Did you get into bands and start thinking music was going to be something you really wanted to do?
Well, I've started. My new favourite way to describe myself is as a failed rock star. That's how I've started introducing myself, and people always, oh no, surely, and I know, no, I always wanted to be a famous rock star, famous guitarist, but that's not what I'm known for. So when I started at 13, I would say I wasn't a natural. And I say this as well, and I've always wondered about this, which is when my dad took me to that guitar shop, there was a couple of guitars in the shop to try. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm left-handed, but I'm very ambidextrous. So they handed me two guitars to try. One was a left-handed Samick and the other was a right-handed Fender Telecaster. And the right-handed guitar just felt, well, I like the look of it better, but it felt, to me, as someone who currently didn't play, it felt no different. Like, I could go this way, I could go that way. Now it feels very natural. So I bought a right-handed guitar despite being left-handed because I just liked it better. And it felt the same both ways. But I do always wonder if I might have been a slightly better player if I'd have played to type. Because what my left hand is slightly more dominant. So, but it took me about 2 years to get like passably good.
Yeah.
As I say, I don't think I'm a natural. Really had to struggle and had to, push myself to learn. And I also, I learned the guitar in the most depressing way possible, which as a 13-year-old girl, had this CD-ROM called the E-Media Guitar Collection. And it was like some old dude playing like Michael Row the Boat Ashore and Sweet Chariot. And I would have to play along with the big desktop PC in the home, the Compact Presario, for anyone who loves vintage computers. And it was really depressing because I used to sit in my dad's office and try and learn these god-awful, boring folk songs when I just wanted to be a punk musician. But my brother had this community of friends who all played and all showed each other stuff and all taught each other. But of course, I didn't have any friends that played, and this was like pre-internet, so there was no YouTube videos to check out. There was no online communities to join. So I kind of did it on hard mode, but I'm a little bit, and I've always been like this, once I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it.
Well, I
cannot be stopped.
So you've touched on two things there. I mean, it's interesting, the comment you made about being the failed musician. Someone once said to me, the music industry is the biggest industry in the world run by failed musicians.
100%.
I often say, that's my background. People say you should say former musician, not failed.
Musician.
But that's where we've all been. You're in a band, you don't make it. It's like, well, I'll get a job in the industry instead. The great A&R, all the great A&Rs, all ex-musicians. But you touched also on tech, right? So music, creativity, tech. I know what comes next in this story, but we will talk about that. But so it sounds to me that you're into tech. You were into tech at quite a young age. Was it something that was also another passion of yours?
Well, so yes, and I'm fortunate as well because I'm I don't know if you've ever heard this theory. I'm the micro generation. It's like a 7-year period where if you were born in this 7-year period, you are old enough to remember not having a mobile phone, like not having like instant internet access and social media. But I got my first mobile when I was 11. Obviously, we had that PC in the home. So for me, I'm also a native in that respect. I didn't have to learn technology as an adult. So although I often tell even younger people than me, the computer had one email address, and so our whole family used the same one email address, and everyone used to go onto the computer each day and like check if there was any emails for them. Can you imagine a group inbox for 5 people?
I mean, the world has changed so much. I can remember dialing up, our games that we played on our old Commodore 64 were on a cassette. It used to take ages. Everything.
The cartridge.
You had to be a lot more patient back in those days. Everything has to be instant now, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, even the same with a Mac laptop. How quickly it opens when you open it up. That always surprises me as well. But so I'm that kind of elder millennial micro generation of remembering what it was like to not have tech, but getting it early enough to be good at it. And I think what happened is, so obviously I was a musician. I used to play in an all-girl punk band in London when I was like in my very early 20s, and I loved music. But then I started branching out I started managing other bands as well. And in the traditional sort of sales tactic, it's easier to sell someone else than it is to sell yourself. And, it's that kind of social proof element. And then also the thing I noticed that a lot of these bands needed was they needed someone to run their MySpace page, showing my age again here. And so learning to self-taught to edit HTML to be able to, make these pages look unique and different and branded, and then expanding it from there. Even just yesterday I built Not to Quit website, just a cheeky little landing page. And so it kind of just went from there, in that like I don't think I was ever really a good enough musician to really sort of make it, which I'm actually quite glad about now. It sort of looks like a bit of a tough time. I don't really want people knowing who I am and having to play shows, a lot of waiting.
You're famous
around.
Enough without having made it as a musician. So can you imagine what it would be like?
I got some nice anonymity. If I'm outside the music industry, no one knows who I am. It's great. But the tech stuff just started to snowball. And as soon as I got into that managing bands, managing websites, and then I got my sort of first real job, which was at Shazam as an early stage employee, and they were offering all the training to be able to, I was one of the people that put the music onto the system. So like, how does the music get onto Shazam so it can be recognised?
Funnily enough, my cousin had that job as a summer job. He's 10 years young. He's the same sort of age as you. And he called me up one day and he said, I've just ingested the Ultra album. So you're in the Shazam machine.
What was he called?
My cousin, cousin Jim. He's everyone's cousin. Jim Tyler. He's a legendary man. So he did it for a summer, and one of the very first when they were first ingesting all of that. Literally physically ingesting albums into the machine.
It depends what year it was, because there was a time period where we had like basically 2 batches of 8 young folk who would work in shifts to do mass ingestion of content, and I used to manage the late shift.
Unbelievable.
So that's where I'm a bit
sure
like,
you're part
I
of
wonder if we crossed paths.
I bet that you must have done. So yeah, no, so in that time, did you have any idea where Shazam was going to end up?
No.
I mean, what an incredible.
No, and it was so funny because when I did work there, so I'm like 22 and I'm working at Shazam, and I remember I met this quite rude woman once, and she said, "Oh, very posh. So what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I work at Shazam." She went, "Never heard of it." And I went, "Oh, it's this thing where you dial this number," because it used to be, dial the 4 numbers down the middle of the phone, 2580, hold up your old school handset, and it would ring the number and then send you a text message back. So I explained that's what it did, and she went, "That's not a thing. I've never heard of it.
Never going to work."
And I was like, yeah, that won't take off. And I was like, well, whatever. And, and I would say now it's probably the thing I get asked about the most, because it went from, when I joined, it was pre-iPhone. And then as soon as smartphones launched and it was one of the first apps in the App Store, it just went absolutely skyrocketed. So yeah, in great times. I was there 4.5 years.
And all of that stuff is part of, I suppose, the apprenticeship that led to ultimately you setting your own thing up.
100%. And there were so many great moments. It was like, I started doing the music ingestion and I really loved that. I was part of the music team, and, Will Mills ran that team, and my boss, Alan Stevenson.
I want to get you on this show, Will, one
day.
You're on the list. You're on the list. Yeah.
And so it's just this great team who I'm still very much in touch with most of the people.
Thanks to our main sponsor, TYX Studios. Based here in the heart of Tileyard, if you're looking for an amazing place to record your podcast, Jack and the team have everything that you need. They built some top-notch podcast, music, photography and content studios that are perfect for bringing your ideas to life. Plus, they offer memberships so you can get the most out of their beautiful co-working spaces too. Check them out at tyxstudios.com to see what they're all about. Big shout out to Jack and everyone at the TYX Studios for supporting us on our journey.
I was also writing for a rock magazine on the side called Big Cheese, and so I used to go and review a lot of heavy metal shows, like Sepultura, Him, Rammstein at Wembley. Went backstage and interviewed the band. So I was doing, but that was all just sort of freelancey stuff. So I was doing that on top, and then all the PR people sort of got to know who I was, and I started getting hit up all the time with "Oh, we've got this artist in town. Can they come in and do you ever do interviews at Shazam? We've got this artist in town. And so I just walked into the CEO's office one day, Andrew Fisher, and I went, "We're getting a lot of inquiries from labels and managers. Do we want to get artists in?" And he went, "If I give you a 10 grand budget, make it happen." And I went, "Yeah, all right then." So set up a little studio within the office, started doing live lounge sessions. I don't know if they're still on YouTube. They used to be. But yeah, we had some fantastic artists come in, like Agnes Obel, C6 Steve, Foxy Shazam, Dinosaur Pilot. We had some amazing artists come in and do sessions. And I got one of the guys, Dan, who was on the customer support team at Shazam, who also happened to be an audio engineer. So he was doing all the audio. I would edit the videos, and it just kind of turned into something that was really impressive. And I think what I learned more than anything, probably didn't know I was learning it at the time, was that if you have an idea and someone's just willing to go, "Yeah, do it," then you can just go for it. And I think what I struggled with after I left Shazam, working for more traditional music companies, more traditional on the majors side, was we don't want to hear your ideas. We don't want you just starting some at random. This is the job. Stay in your lane. Yeah. So I realised that that's how I know tech's for me.
Yeah. Because I can very much relate to that. I mean, meeting Paul Kemp, business partner who owns Tileyard, he's very much that type of that super entrepreneurial and doing things other people probably wouldn't quite have the balls to do. Yeah. And he was the same. It's let's do this, and backed the idea. Yeah. So so then when you're talking to someone about doing something, that we can follow through. Whereas there's a lot of hot air in this business. A lot of people say they're going to do it and they never do. So the backing is, and the support and having that the right hand person, it's so important.
Yeah. And to realise as well, even at that sort of early 20s, to realise I'm best when I've got an idea and I can just run with it, and I don't flourish as well, or I don't enjoy as much when I'm just given a very do what you're told, very rote job, and well, you shouldn't be talking to that person, and it's not your job to speak to that person, and and it doesn't matter how good the idea was. I think I've probably told this story before, but I was hired at UMG in Australia, and I was hired as a videographer, and I was like, fantastic. There was a big star in town. I think it might have been Gaga. It was Gaga, I remember. And I just didn't get put on the call sheet for she had a day of press and they just didn't put me on the call sheet. And I was like, but I'm our internal house videographer. I can cut us as much content as we want and we can syndicate it out to an extra 100 channels if you want. But they were like, no, because she's got ABC, then she's got Sydney Morning Herald, and I was like, that's just the old way of doing things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I get it, and they had their job to do, but I kind of also got to a point where I was like, well, why did you hire me? And I sort of ended up, there was a few of the label managers there who sort of snuck me in on their bills. I started doing if I couldn't get into a show like with the Lady Gaga one because I couldn't get any time with the artist, I did some vox pops on the street because all the fans had gone mad dressing up for the Monsters Ball, and they and just even that, so I could create content, but I had to get really inventive about how to do it. And it's like, well, why has a company hired me to kind of, and then to prevent me from doing the job that they think I should do.
There seems to be a theme here. So clearly you're creative, you're tenacious. You like to prove people wrong. Yeah. All of this stuff. So obviously that's great qualities to have if you're going to set your own business up. But you're still a few years away from doing that. So you had four and a bit great years at Shazam.
Oh, yeah.
Did you then go straight to Universal?
27 at the time I left UMG.
Straight to Universal from there, or did you have a
got headhunted. And that was the mad part. I was like, you found me. You headhunted me. You moved me from London to Australia to do this job. And then I got there and found out most people were not on board.
Right.
And I was just like, that's frustrating. And so I only ended up staying a year there. I did meet a lot of good friends. I never regret the time that I spent there. And, I was still in touch with some of the people that I worked with. My old boss, Mia McLeod, I think she's fantastic. I did meet some great people, but it was the labels at that time. And they were just not open to innovation. And they were, it was right around the time when I worked there, you could still meet people who'd walk up and tell you straight in the face that they hate music streaming and that music streaming's killing the industry. I mean, someone would get laughed out the room now if they said that. But it's, whether they do like it or not. But so it was just a difficult time. And I realised, I'm not waiting for permission. I don't work well in a job where you tell me what to do. Whether you're right or not, it's like, no, I'm just going to go ahead and do it.
I think I can relate to that a little bit, actually. And sometimes it can bode well, and other times it can get you into a little bit of hot water.
I think it's my husband who said, the challenge is when you're the person who sticks your head above the parapet in the trench, you're the one who gets shot as well. So that's happened more than a few times.
Well, I think you've got to take ownership of stuff, and if you want the accolade, you've also got to accept that if you don't get it right, you're accountable.
Yeah.
So a year at Universal. Where did you go next?
After that, I went to I had a stint at the Australian Chamber Orchestra, 6-month contract doing videography and PR for them. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. I mean, for anyone who's watching this, if you've ever worked in the classical music world, there is literally no nicer people. I mean, the whole industry should model themselves on the classical and the opera and the ballet world, because they all work together, and they realise that, if the ballet sells more tickets and the opera sells more tickets, the orchestra sells more tickets, if you grow the pie overall, and just the attitudes of people in there, it's just a great crowd. And so worked doing some PR and videography for the ACO, the Australian Chamber Orchestra, in Sydney. Did that for 6 months. Absolutely loved it. And then got headhunted again by Pandora.
Right, Pandora. So so tell us about that, because that's a brand name that possibly don't hear quite so much about these days.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it is, to be honest, it is very US centric. And I must admit, when I got the job, I called up my mum and I said, I've got a job at Pandora marketing. And she was like, interesting. I didn't see you at the bracelet company, but
I was gonna say,
but I love that my mum just sort of accepted it, like that was something I might do.
A pivot,
So we ended up always referring to it as Pandora Internet Radio, the full name, because otherwise, people would think that we were the jewellery company. And so I was part of the team that we were launching Australia and New Zealand. And, they've since shuttered it again after the company was acquired, I think, by SiriusXM. But yeah, it was great fun.
And at that point, were you, and previous to that point, I suppose, were you in the back of your mind thinking, one day I want to do something of my own? Or did that come about slightly by surprise?
Yes and no. I think, to be honest, if you'd have asked me at that age, I'd have said that I always thought that I would end up running my own company or that I would do something. But I was just sort of waiting for an idea. And this is the part that I got wrong. I thought I'd just be, I don't know, having a shower, doing the washing up, and I'd suddenly go and I'd have a fully formed idea
like
in my head.
A lightning bolt moment, yeah.
It doesn't work like that. And so the way I ended up building a company was I got invited to join a startup incubator, Entrepreneur First. They are in the UK, but I joined in Singapore. And basically, they get you in and you come up with an idea. You start, and the way I did that was I wrote down the top 10 worst things about the music industry. And then I workshopped it with my co-founder, Aaron, to go, which of these can we fix? And, the one we landed on was about number 4 on the list, which was, when I started at Shazam, we used to brag about having 14 million tracks. Well, that's the entire history of music. We're now, 2024, and there's 90 million on most services. All right, how's that happened? How did that come about? How are we managing that? So that was the problem that we started to look at.
It's a good way of doing it. It makes loads of sense, doesn't it? There's so many businesses you hear about where, it's all about the product or the idea, and then they sort of almost invent the problem that thing will solve. It's sort of the wrong way around. Yeah,
quite often you see a cool solution looking for a problem. Yeah. And then sometimes you see problems where, with the best will in the world, a solution may come or may not come, And I've seen, for example, I see a lot of pitch decks these days because I do a bit of investing, and I've seen 3 this week for fixing metadata when it comes to music rights management and payouts. Now, there's almost no chance that all 3 of these are going to be successful. Why everyone's doing this right now, I'm unsure, but I don't even think the biggest challenges are technical. They're social buy-in. Mm-hmm. So even though the problem is quite clear, the solution is going to be a lot more difficult for that challenge.
No, I agree. And it's interesting. Paul, through Tileyard, we've invested in a few things. And we'll touch on that, no doubt, in a minute. Yeah. And I can remember very early on, Cliff Fluey, who's been on the show, actually, always said to me, he said, anyone that tries to pitch you, I'm going to change the music industry. He said, the first thing I would say is the music industry doesn't want to be changed.
No.
We can fix problems within the sector, but to try, it doesn't need it. It's working perfectly well for those for the gatekeepers.
Yeah, exactly. And that when I was starting building in around 2018, the big thing was always licensing and royalties on the blockchain. Get it all on the blockchain. And I was like, there's a lot of people who do very, very well out of the opacity of the current system. They are not interested in having a fully transparent, traceable ledger of the money. And until that is not true, or more people buy in than don't, that's not going to happen. I personally think it's a good idea, but that isn't enough to create
the world's
change.
Not looking for it just yet. Thank you very much.
Exactly, the world's, and until you get that buy-in or somebody of significant influence starts that company, I think that, the status quo suits a lot of people.
So I agree. So you were brainstorming ideas.
Yeah.
And you had four good ideas, and
10, but some 10. Of them were, I always say, because I decided I'll try to push myself to write 10, but number 6 was just people are arseholes. And my co-founder Aaron was like, there isn't an AI solution for that just yet.
I always thought everyone was just normal and lovely, but as I've got older, I think maybe it's not quite like that in this world.
When anyone asks me about working in the music industry, I'm always like, have you ever seen it portrayed in a film? Yeah, it's like that, but much worse. I've heard advertising is equally as interesting. But it's a lot of big personalities, it's a lot of agendas, and it's a lot of, it's a lot of sort of specific challenges to creativity and power and vacuums of power. So it's, but I'm still here kind of 20 years later.
Well, hopefully it all boils down to creativity and talent and quality.
It should do.
So you ended up with, when we were sort of introduced, I think someone probably one of our mutual friends and connections in this industry said, you've got to speak to Hazel. She's incredible.
I think it was Will.
It could have been Will. It would have been, yeah. So your old boss at Shazam.
Yeah.
So Will said, you've got to speak to Hazel. She's amazing and she's got this great business. So the one idea that you ended up going for, what led you down that road out of the 10 ideas? And I'm sure you had more than 10.
Yeah.
What gave you the confidence that this was the idea that you were going to put your heart and soul into?
It was a couple of things. It was that when we were discussing the problem, and before I was at Shazam, I worked at HMV on Oxford Street. And, you and I are of an age to remember that when, the store shut at 4 p.m. on a Sunday, I was out there stocking the shelves with the new singles, could have been Ultra, for Monday morning at 9 a.m. All new music used to come out at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. And your average week would have like 5 CD singles. And to just go to that, and it was the same year, 2018, that I started building Musiio, that Spotify put out a press release to say they had 60,000 songs a day uploaded to their platform. Yeah. And it was literally just a bit of a, hang on a minute, 60,000 a day used to be 5 a week. All right, so what's that? That's more in a day that used to come out in a whole year. That's a challenge, surely. Yeah. So you think you're sort of pulling at a thread of something. And then really it was working with my business partner, Aaron, who's a very, very deeply technical AI developer. And I thought, and I just said, could an AI listen to that volume of music? Hadn't figured out what the product would be yet, but can an AI process 60,000 songs a day? Because a human can't. Like, even if you're assuming they're all 3.5 minutes, put them back to back, physically a human couldn't listen to all of them. It's something like 83 days worth of music, 24 hours a day, something like that.
And it's now more than twice that, right?
It's way over 100,000 now. I think 100,000 was the latest official number that I saw Spotify put out. But and Aaron just said, I just remember I said, could you build an AI that listened to music? And he went, I think I could. And so that was, we're still pulling at more of the thread here. And it just went from there to be like, okay, well, can we? Let's try and test that theory within the next 2 weeks. And then after that, okay, well, if we can, what's the benefit? What's the output? What could we do with this? And it all just built from there. Yeah. And we sort of realised we were onto something with just the ability to just process insanely large volumes of music.
It sounds like, it's a bit like writing a song, I suppose. When you're jamming a song as a band, you come up with an idea and then you hone it and go, no, we can do better with the chorus. So you're honing this piece of, this business model, this idea.
Definitely.
So at what point, how long did it take you to get to a point where it's right, there's something in this, right, let's go with it. Let's start recruiting. We need somewhere to base ourselves. We need... Possibly we need investment, we need money. Did it happen quite quickly?
Because we met via the startup incubator, which I had agreed to. I joined EF because they basically, at the 6-month mark, they set up an investor demo day. And you pitched to 200 investors at Google in Singapore. And that was why I joined, because, which is, to be fair, the last stage. But I was like, I'd never met an investor at that point. Never met one in my life. Wouldn't know where to find them. Wouldn't know what to say if I met one. And so, they were offering that network of, we'll get 200 people in the room who invest. And I thought, that's very valuable. So I started out, and that's where I met my co-founder as well. And I don't think I'd have met him just sort of bumbling around, So, I think when I first met him, he hadn't been to a gig in like 6 years or something. So I was like, all right, so we're unlikely to have just met randomly. Yeah. And really it was, once we started working together, we had a good working relationship. We're a similar age. We sort of got similar motivations. And I actually can even pinpoint the exact time that I knew we had something. There was a couple of funny moments. Aaron, my co-founder, works off a very powerful gaming laptop, which has got its own, I think, GPU processors internally, so he can run models. I mean, he cranked through these laptops. We had to buy him a new one every year because it would just fry itself from training AI models. But I remember he had a very powerful gaming laptop when I first met him. And I remember the first sort of breakthrough was one day he accidentally rebuilt Shazam. So he hadn't built an AI that could listen to music, but he had built an AI that could find the exact same track, which is essentially what the Shazam technology is, which, we were sort of 15 years after the invention of Shazam. So the fact he did it in a morning, it's not that impressive anymore. But we were like, okay, well, we know we've done that. That's 15 years ago. We could have built Shazam. But now that, just identical recognition is not that difficult. And then I remember the second sort of major breakthrough we had, which was we used to sort of set his laptop running on a model, go out for lunch and come back, because that's how long it would take to run, at least 30 minutes from like show me the output to processing, because nothing was productized. And we were working with a database of music called the Free Music Archive, which is about 140,000 tracks under Creative Commons. And we basically had one song, and we asked the AI to build a playlist from this database based on this one song as like the starting track, as the seed track. And so we set it going, and we went to lunch, and we came back, and Aaron just emailed me the list of 10 songs, and I listened through all of them, and they were all good quality, and they all fitted stylistically, sonically, and genre-wise. And I was like, holy shit, that's amazing.
Born in King's Cross and brewed right here in Tileyard, Two Tribes is one of the fastest growing and most exciting independent beer brands, founded with the creative community front of mind whilst brewing great beer. You'll not only find them in supermarkets and some of your favourite local pubs and restaurants, but in art galleries, festivals and music venues too. Award-winning beer Two Tribes focuses on more than what's in the can or the glass. It's an opportunity to create memorable moments in memorable places with memorable people. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. Check them out by visiting www.twotribes.co.uk and see what they're up to on Instagram at Two Tribes Brew. Please always drink responsibly.
A great combo, the two of you. You got the technical sort of brain, and then you got the creative brain.
Yeah. And I think that's honestly what ultimately led to our investment as well, because when we raised our seed round of $2 million from Wavemaker Partners in Singapore, at the time, they did 5 investments in the same period of time, and we were the only pre-revenue company. And they told us it was the strength of the team. Yeah. You very rarely see, I mean, what's fun about Aaron and I is there is zero overlap in our talents. Yeah. Nothing I can do, he can do. Yeah. And nothing he can do, I can do. But we get on really well. So, you've got 2 founders who are doing everything, whereas usually that's uncommon. Usually there's more overlap, both are a bit good at sales, or both are actually developers, or, so they just invested off the strength of, that early traction we'd had proving the model worked, and the strength of the team.
So we talk a lot about the key ingredients of success, and we touched team, the idea, the ability to tell the story, and having that sort of the sales kind of selling the idea, raising the money.
Yeah.
So you've got to a point where you've got a great idea. You're in AI. This is in 18, right? So obviously AI is very, very much talked about today.
People weren't that interested in 2018.
I can remember it well, and it wasn't that hotter space, was it, back then? But,
we used to call it machine learning back in 2018, because nobody was really using AI as a phraseology. And as I say, it was so funny, because the cohort of the startup incubator that I did, about over half of the companies were crypto. Because this was right before the 2019 Bitcoin crash. This is 2018. So most of the companies in our cohort were building in the Bitcoin space. So we were a little bit sort of different in that we were AI focused, but also that we were music industry focused, which definitely nobody else was in that space.
So you've got a great idea, and you've got $2 million in the bank that you've now got to deploy and spend and invest. And so what was the plan? Was there a game plan, a business plan that you had, that you wanted to build the business, generate revenue, I guess, and start making profit with a view to selling? Did you have a roadmap, or did you sort of take it as it came?
Not that specifically. No, not that specifically. I mean, when you raise money, when we did raise that seed round, I mean, you have to present a 5-year financial plan, which obviously we did. But then, what the investors say to you is, the only thing we know about this is it won't be right. Nobody knows their numbers, because you're just giving your best estimate at that point. In the air. Yeah. But you have to do it. So, we sold before we were 5 years old. I'd love to go back and look at that 5-year financial plan now. I might do that this afternoon. What did I think? But for me, it was really because we raised pre-revenue. And again, I'm not sure I would recommend that to other startups moving forward. The amount of pressure is insane. When you take that kind of money off someone and you've got to deliver, like, I kind of, in a lot of ways, I almost wish I'd waited another 6 months till I got my first paying client. But really, it was just like the clock was on, the timer was set. And getting from, we've raised that $2 million, getting from there to now we have paying clients, that was like the highest stress period, apart from selling. But also there was, just that time period where I was like, we just need to prove people will pay for this. We need to prove that, like, I think we've built something great. I think this is really beneficial. But I'm going in and I'm talking to streaming services, publishers, record labels, catalogs, where I'm not replacing something they already have. So it's not like they go, okay, well, we take this budget and this is a better solution, so we do that. We're creating a whole new market category. And that's even harder to do, because it's not like I can go, oh, you've got an HR software and you pay 20 grand a year. Well, my HR software is only 15 grand a year and it's twice as good. That's an easy, budget over here. But I'm walking in and showing them something they've never seen, that they see it and they want it. But now it's got to be sold all the way up the chain to, we need to find money from somewhere to pay for this. This is a whole new vertical. So it makes it an even harder sell. And, so my goal really was just to get as many paying clients as possible. And I wanted to get us to a point where we're sort of washing our own face. There's enough money coming in the door to cover the costs.
Yeah, good strategy. I mean, it's interesting hearing you describe it. It's not an easy game. I've got lots of friends that work in the sort of more of the corporate world, and it's like, it'd be great to have my own business. It's like, really? Grass is always greener. It's interesting. Yeah. The analogy of you raise the money, you got the idea. Actually, that's just the beginning, and still the percentage of failures from that point.
And you know what? It's like the amount of pressure when someone gives you that amount of money. And even myself and Aaron, my co-founder, we used to joke. We'd be walking along the street and we'd go, just imagine working for someone else, just paying us a nice big steady wage, and
sounds quite appealing.
We could just go home.
Yeah,
that'd be it for today. And we both just laughed. And also Aaron is my co-founder, is a very, very smart guy, because when we first started working together, this was another challenge at EF. I don't think I've ever told this story before, but a lot of companies fail at Entrepreneur First within the first couple of weeks, because everyone works in pairs. And some teams just cannot decide who will be the CEO. It's like a big fight, like as in, because it is the top job. And I thought, I was really dreading that conversation with Aaron, because I thought, look, he's technical, I'm sales. Technically, it should be me who's CEO and he's CTO, but I don't want him to think I'm, trying to be pushy or be the boss or whatever. And I just said, just on the topic of, and Aaron went, I'll be CTO. That makes the most sense. You're CEO, I'm CTO. And I just was like, well, that was easy.
Yeah.
Then about 6 months later, I went, you knew, didn't you? You knew being CEO was a rubbish job. And he was like, yep. It's literally chief shit taker.
So
like,
you ended up with a rubbish job. Yeah.
If the investors have a problem, his phone does not ring. My phone rings.
Well, it's an interesting point. So you ended up at the CEO role. So that saved the company. That you didn't have to have that argument.
We didn't have to stop working together that instant.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Someone said to me the other day about women in business. And
right.
One of the things that really compelled us to your story was the fact it's a great idea, and we really got on well with you, and we really liked you, and we knew people that really rated you, and we ended up investing. But it was interesting, and you're a woman running a music or building a music tech company. It was a great story. Someone said to me the other day that FTSE 100, 2 female CEOs. I mean, that's nothing to be proud of, is it? And it's interesting. And I know what comes next. So you ended up. It came very unexpectedly. You had an offer for the business.
And I must admit, I said to my business partner Aaron, from the first day we started working together, I said, because he comes from like a gaming and a finance background, and I just said, just a heads up, music tech is super high acquisition. We'll get offers. They might be good, they might not be good. But like, you look at the rate at which Apple, Amazon, Spotify and others acquire companies, that's a probable outcome. And the reason why I wanted to give Aaron a heads up is because I thought, say, for example, one of the majors wants to come and acquire us. It will come with an insane lock-in for him and a thank you very much, here's the door for me. Because they have people like me, but they don't have people like him. So I also just needed to check that if we get to that point, is he up for that? Is he okay with that? And he understood it straight from the off. As it turns out, with the SoundCloud acquisition, they wanted us both. Best case scenario, they took the whole team. But we had, throughout the whole 4 years of running the company, and that is quick, 4 years from idea, build, raise, profit, sale. 4 years is I appreciate a very, very short time. But we were having acquisition offers the whole time. The whole time we were building, I almost used to get into I had a bit of a sort of a catchphrase, any time someone had talked to me, they'd say, "And are you for sale?" And I'd say, "Give me a number."
Everything's for sale at the right price, as they say.
Exactly, yeah. So I'll take a number. And, if they give you a number, they're serious. If they don't, they're not. But, that just happened the whole time. So I was never... So I told Aaron this is how it would be. And then obviously, yes, a very serious offer came in from SoundCloud. But we were right at that point as well, because you guys had just invested. Paul, yourself and Tileyard had invested in Musiio. And actually, I was really excited because you were actually our first strategic investor. Before you, we'd never had someone who knows the music industry invest. And that's because we were in Singapore. And there are no music tech investors in Singapore. And so I'd had to build so far I had deep tech AI investors, which was great because, they were like, "We're going to write you a check and let you get on with it." I was like, that works for me. But I was so excited to work with yourself and Paul because you were music industry investors and you'd seen it and you'd wanted to come in. So I was really, really excited. And then we were right at that point where, and I don't know if I've ever talked much about this, but it was either we're going to go and raise a Series A or we're going to exit. And so I was gearing up. I had all the decks, had all the, I've got 1.5 million year of rev. I'm good to go. I'm good to raise my Series A. And I'd been teeing up the big...
Rocket boost the business.
Yeah, I've been teeing up the big US Series A investors. I had my short list, strategics. But then the acquisition offer came in. And it was really a case then of just weighing up what's the best potential outcome. And I would have been happy with either outcome, but raising and building is higher risk. And, when there's a good offer on the table,
Absolutely. It was interesting. It was a double-edged sword for us because, funny enough, we had just agreed to build a Musiio space at Tileyard North in Wakefield because you live up in Leeds.
I was going to put everyone there.
And so you were the first deal that I did up there in this brand new music campus up in Wakefield. And I remember you saying, "I've got some good news and some bad news. One is I'm not going to need that space anymore, but I'm selling to SoundCloud, who are based at Tileyard, London. So funny enough, you spend 3 days a week here in London. So,
yes, I'm
so we
here
got
all the
you
time.
Anyway. We got you anyway.
I've been to the Wakefield campus. I've been to some great events there. I've been invited to talk over there. And I already knew the campus in Wakefield as well because I've been to Hepworth Gallery, which is right next door. So, yeah, it's only about 20 minutes away from my house. So I love the whole ecosystem. And, I was like, yeah, the bad news is I won't be taking as a big space in Wakefield, but the good news is I got a load of money for you. Everyone knows it.
In terms of where you're at now and where you're going, so what's the next year or two looking like for you, do you think, Hazel?
Well, I've got a really exciting sort of portfolio at the minute, and I call it that, like a portfolio career, because once I had sold Musiio, with the sort of agreement with SoundCloud, I took on a couple of non-exec director roles. So I sit on the board of Unheard Music and I sit on the board of another music tech company in Australia called Tune Global. And, they both invited me to join the board because of the experience I have building music tech startups, raising money, exiting, etc. And I've got really great relationships with both Alex and Con, the founders at those businesses. And, I just love getting on calls with them. I'd happily chat with those blokes anytime. So, when I got invited to do those board roles, I sort of ran that past SoundCloud and it all got approved. And I just love doing that. And I think there's potentially more of that in the future. And then the other thing, which I won't say I fell into it, but I've started doing some angel investing myself as well, which I always thought I would like to do. And it's just sort of happened. I think maybe actually the very, very first investment I did was AudioShake, which is a source separation technology. And I remember because I'd met Jessica, the founder, who is phenomenal. I mean, talk about women in tech. I met her and she'd just come out of being a VP of comms at Google for 11 years. Wow. I mean, there's nothing gets past that woman. She is good. Right. And I just really liked her. And then I saw the tech and I tried it and I was like, oh yeah, you've nailed this. Like, this works, which people had talked about source separation for years, but it never really worked. So I was like, not only have you got the tech, you've got the team. Yeah. I was like, I'm in. And, you know, she'd been very, very kind as well. And she'd kept a portion of her allocation for female investors, because I don't think I'd have got in otherwise, because she's so popular and so oversubscribed. But it was really important to her to have female investors. So I think that was the first investment I did. And I bit a hand off because I thought, I've got to get in on this. And so I hadn't sort of formally planned to get into investing quite so quickly. But when opportunity comes along, you've just got to grab it.
And it's great to give back. It's great. And it's great for businesses that are raising money to have, it's not just about the money. It's what comes with the money. It's the expertise, it's the passion, it's the encouragement, the support.
Yeah. So and quite often, I mean, I do predominantly invest in music AI technologies, or AI proprietary models for the music industry. That's my sweet spot. And I've met some great companies. I've invested in some great companies. But I do think it's a challenge, and I get about 20 decks a week, you know, and it could be, you know, just this week I was sent like a live ticketing play. I've never worked in live. I've never worked in ticketing. I've never worked in events. I know why they would want me to invest, but I don't think I've got anything to add. So, you know, some stuff I just have to pass on because I just feel like it's not my wheelhouse.
It's important. It's much easier to say yes than no, isn't it? In life?
Yeah, exactly. And also I run that risk of, like, you know, as I'm sure you know, I can't say yes to everything, because, you know, I'm still managing my whole career. So I can't just yet say, you know, yes to, you know, 50 advisory boards, because I only say yes if I'm going to be able to do a good job and if I think I have something to add. So yeah, I try not to spread myself too thin.
Well, we'll have a chat afterwards. You can tell me all the good ones to
I probably still do spread myself too thin, but I try not to.
Well, Hazel, it's been great chatting to you. As one of the certainly one of the most exciting success stories coming out of Tileyard over the last 5 or 6 years, and continues to, and long may that continue, your success. Thanks for coming on the show, and can't wait to talk to you again.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Thanks for listening to Tileyard, The Secret Sauce, with me, your host, Nick Keynes. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you go to tileyard.co.uk to find out more about our amazing community, and looking forward to sharing more stories and insights from the heart of Tileyard.